And here we thought a headless horseman of Hessian heritage was going to be foil enough for one story, but old Washington Irving has thrown something else in entirely. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another video in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow read-along series. This is a video which will appear in two playlists here on the channel: the Legend of Sleepy Hollow read-along, as well as the Classic Haunts playlist, a playlist of videos dedicated to the month of October here in 2025 as we lead into Halloween. All of these videos will be based on horror genre stuffs. This video will have three sections: a So What Happened portion, which is a recap of what it is that we just read, a literary criticism section based on the literary criticisms that can go into this, what can we take out of this text, and finally a writer's corner where we talk about the things we can learn from this story as writers ourselves. So, what happened? Well, we open with Ichabod thinking of the wealth he could create with the Van Tassel land, and then getting out of Sleepy Hollow. But he has competition. Brom Van Brunt, who is not a teacher, but a tough guy, and a sort of beloved fellow around town as well. Beloved by basically everyone except for Ichabod Crane, I suppose, because of what we will see later. But it seems no one else is foolish enough to court Katrina because, well, because Brom Van Brunt is courting her. So no one else is dumb enough to do this, except for Ichabod Crane, of course. And for his part, Ichabod being no match physically for Brom Bones, Brom Bones took to the subtle and high art of bullying. He breaks into Ichabod Crane's classroom and turns everything upside down, things like that. Thusly, Ichabod is invited to attend a merrymaking or quilting frolic to be held that very evening at Miner Van Tassel's place. So that is where we are from a story standpoint. What are we talking about in the literary criticism domain for this third episode of the Sleepy Hollow read-along series? Well, I want to start with this paragraph here. From the moment Ichabod laid his eyes upon these regions of delight, the peace of his mind was at an end, and his only study was how to gain the affections of the peerless daughter of Van Tassel. In this enterprise, however, he had more real difficulties than generally fell to the lot of a knight errant of yore, who seldom had anything but giants, enchanters, fiery dragons, and such like easily conquered adversaries to contend with, and had to make his way merely through gates of iron and brass, and walls of adamant to the castle keep, where the lady of his heart was confined. Here we enter the Headless Horseman and Brom Bones, Brom Van Brunt. So we will have the sort of two-villain story that maybe we didn't see coming, but I think that Washington Irving has set up nicely here, because it seems that what you will have is you will have the fair maiden, the Van Tassel lady, and you will have Ichabod Crane pursuing her, and in his way is Brom Bones. So how do we win her out from under Brom Van Brunt? Well, we have to be the one to conquer the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow fame, do we not? And that sets us up for the only other real literary talking point that I have for this episode of the show: love, rivalry, and the labors of heroes. I've talked a little bit about how this is shaping up to be something of an American fairy tale, right? So what are the constituent parts of a fairy tale? Well, I asked, and this is what I got. Timeless opening and setting, once upon a time. We don't really have that here. Archetypal characters, princess, princes, wicked step-parents, tricksters, ogres, wise old helpers. We don't have the old version of that here, but we do have the new type, don't we? We do have the sort of dandy that is Ichabod Crane, that is maybe to stand in for a prince, or maybe this is a pauper type hero. It seems that this is more of the pauper type hero because, after all, from where does Ichabod Crane come? If he was part of a wealthy family, he would have some inheritance. It appears he does not. It appears that he came to Sleepy Hollow looking to make the name for himself that he did not inherit. And he would not, if he were from money, be so taken aback by the Van Tassel fortune, but he is. So it looks like we have an underdog that we are rooting for. We do have the bully type bad guy in Brom Bones here, and we do have something of the fantastical with the Headless Horseman. We also have an enchanted land. We also have the Princess Katrina. So we do have many of these constituent parts. Clear moral polarity. Good versus evil is sharp. Motives are simple and legible. We are approaching this, it seems. It seems that the man of letters is being set up to be the good guy. Perhaps a little bit of a sissy, but a good guy. We have the lady on high who is on the good side. We have an archetypal bad guy in Brom Bones, and we're going to have a very bad guy in the Headless Horseman. Magic and supernatural. Spells, curses, talking animals, witches, fairy godmothers, enchanted objects. We don't have a whole lot of that, but we had a whole lot of talk about ghosts, and we're going to get one. We've had a whole lot of talk about witches. Maybe we'll have something fantastical in here, but we will have at least a little bit of this. A quest or test. This is going to be, I think, represented by the pursuit of the Headless Horseman himself, but also the pursuit of the quote-unquote princess. Transformation, shape-shifting, rags to riches, beast to human, inner virtue made outwards. That rags to riches storyline is the one that Ichabod Crane is pursuing. Ichabod Crane's clothes don't even fit. Ichabod Crane's career as a teacher does not get him what he needs. He has to work side jobs. So that is what we are going for there. Helper figures. This is yet to be seen. I've never read the short story, so I do not know if we will go there. We will revisit this at the conclusion of the series. Symbolic objects and motifs. Glass slipper, spinning wheel, golden apple. Yet to get any of that. Repetition and formula. Yet to really get any of that. Economical style, we do have that. We do have a very economical, very fairy tale type style here from Washington Irving. Moral or wish fulfillment end. Well, we haven't gotten there yet, but folkloric roots. This is nothing if it is not a new American folklore. It seems that this is being written to be a new American folklore. Boundary crossing into woods, underworld, otherworld. We do have a little bit of that into the woods, into the legendary Sleepy Hollow. Hidden codes. Warnings about hunger, poverty, danger, social rights. Maybe we will get that with Ichabod Crane lusting so heavily after the fortune of the Van Tassels. Now, I thought that this was a great paragraph here to take a look at the characterization in this short story so far. I lost myself, I apologize. Such was the formidable rival with whom Ichabod Crane had to contend, and, considering all things, a stouter man than he would have shrunk from a stouter man than he would have shrunk from the competition, and a wiser man would have despaired. He had, however, a happy mixture of pliability and perseverance in his nature. He was, in form and spirit, like a supple jack, yielding, but tough, Though he bent, he never broke. And though he bowed beneath the slightest pressure, yet, the moment it was away, jerk, he was erect, and carried his head as high as ever. That is a great bit of characterization. Now, you would hope, if this were a novel, it would be best to have this in a show don't tell format. But since it is a short story and we have very limited time with these characters, this is understandable. It is understandable to have this told to us in this way rather than showing it happen from time to time in the story. Were it a novel, you would like to have a couple different instances where the pressure did build on Ichabod Crane and he did not wilt under it, but he bent in order to spring back. We will likely what this is, however, is foreshadowing, right? So as opposed to in a novel format, you would want to give a couple examples in the text. You want a small one real early in the story, then a little bit further into the story, you have a bigger example, and then the entire novel itself serves as one great big example of something like this. This is a foundational characteristic of this character. And then we have something else that I thought was a good paragraph. It's dated because of the way it's talking about gender, etc. But the real reason you can't get away with it anymore is because proclamations like this are hard to pass off in fiction these days. Part of it is the show don't tell thing, but part of it is the idea that omniscient narrators have kind of gone by the wayside. So if you can really work this into your voice, you can get away with it. But I think a lot of editors these days kind of poo-poo paragraphs like this. But we also have a narrator that is inserting himself into the text with the first person I. So that's a little bit off-putting, I think, sometimes, but I think it's pulled off here. I profess not to know how women's hearts are wooed and won. To me, they have always been matters of riddle and admiration. Now that sounds like Ichabod Crane talking there from what we've been told about Ichabod Crane. So this is perhaps a character that serves as self-insert for Washington. Some seem to have but one vulnerable point or door of access, while others have 1,000 avenues and may be captured in 1,000 different ways. It is a great triumph of skill to gain the former, but a still greater proof of generalship to maintain possession of the latter. For man must battle for his fortress at every door and window. He who wins 1,000 common hearts is therefore entitled to some renown. But he who keeps undisputed sway over the heart of a coquette is indeed a hero. Certain it is, this was not the case with the redoubtable Brom Bones. And from the moment Ichabod Crane made his advances, the interests of the former evidently declined. His horse was no longer seen tied to the palings on Sunday nights, and a deadly feud gradually arose between him and the preceptor of Sleepy Hollow. So I think that is just a really good paragraph, and it is, first off, it's very fairy tale, right? It is very storytelling fairy tale rather than showing the story on the page. It takes you out of the text. But I think it's good. If you could find some character through whom you could pass this knowledge, it might come off a little easier to a reader. It might come off a little better to a modern day editor if this were from the mouth of the quote-unquote helper. And that's one of the things that is perhaps most upsetting about this text. The narrator here could have easily been substituted for one of those helpers, right? The Yoda of the story. But Ichabod Crane does not have one. Instead, we have a first-person narrator who inserts this way. So I think that a lot of the first-person narrator stuff is difficult to pass off if it is a third-person story anymore, because the storyteller archetype is kind of dead in modern literature. And look, I've always said there's things that you can't do unless you can do them. So if you can do it well enough, you can bring it back. But I do think that a lot of this stuff would be best served passed through a different character in the text. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.